LSU, Brian Kelly came rocking and rolling. He was hot and spicy today. Lost his accent. I didn't hear his accent at all. Somebody did ask, like, hey, how's that recruiting accent going on? Took a little bit of a jab. I loved it. Brian Kelly took it in stride, said he's working on it. It's getting better. He's a very dry humor personality. He made a joke about something, and it just, the way his delivery was a little weak. I think you could probably pop it in a little bit, Brian, on your delivery of jokes. But all in all, look, they got a lot of things going on. I got my notepad here. I was taking some notes today. A lot was going on. I was moving 100 miles a minute. The biggest takeaway that I got is Jaden Daniels. I got some takeaways we're going to talk about here in just a little bit here. Focus on, or Jaden Daniels' Heisman favorite. He never said this. This wasn't Brian Kelly's words himself, but for me, I felt like just the hype that was behind him understanding, like he kind of talked about Jaden and how he got better throughout the season last year, how his confidence grew. Game 1 against FSU, when he would step into the pocket, meant that he was running the ball towards the end of the year. A step into the pocket was, hey, let's step up and make a good throw. So he's really excited about Jaden Daniels and what he's able to bring. Obviously, there's a lot of news and noise surrounding the quarterback situation in the SEC. You got to think that Jaden Daniels has got to be a top guy. KJ Jefferson's getting a lot of love in Arkansas, as is Milton from Tennessee. But Jaden Daniels, in my opinion, has got to be the front runner for the SEC this year, and definitely a Heisman favorite, probably a low-end Heisman favorite. But look, LSU did something that nobody expected last year, make it to the SEC championship. The way that Brian Kelly was talking the entire press conference was how do we know we're at the next level? By the eye test. How do we compare against Georgia? What happens when we match up against Georgia, when we meet at Georgia in the SEC? Unreal. But you got to get through the West first, right? He's not even talking about Bama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, who everybody's hyped up about. He's already assuming that Georgia, and he's not wrong for assuming here, that Georgia's going to be in the championship, and that's where LSU finds himself. Look, Brian Kelly, as much as we hate him here, the guy's been doing this for a very long time, okay? And he knows his way around the microphone. He knows his way to say things without saying things. And when you just kind of repeat Georgia and say, hey, they're going to be the focus. That's who we're looking to beat. That's who we're going to be able to tell when we made that next step is how we compare to Georgia. And look, they're the new Bama in a sense. He's basically saying nobody else matters, and we're here to come and get you. Look, so I loved it. It was a good time to hear him talk about that a little bit. An interesting one is somebody asked him, and they didn't ask anybody else, which I thought was strange. I didn't do enough digging to see if he may have talked about this before. But I didn't hear the question asked to anybody else, which I think would have been good to ask all three of the coaches. It's the same exact question, is how is AI, artificial intelligence, going to impact college football, right, and their game planning? And Brian Kelly goes, look, it's going to impact not only game planning, but how we evaluate recruiting, right? How we're going to look at a guy, we're going to take the stats and the configurations of a player and plug it into an algorithm, and it's going to tell us what we're going to want to go after, what we're going to look at. Which in sense will, hopefully cut down on your recruiting profile and your recruiting process. And it's got me thinking, right? At first, I was like, could this be the end of the recruiting sites? But look, coaches don't use the recruiting sites anyways. We, the fans, look at that to get like a preference. So I just think it's going to evolve the recruiting and honestly become more accurate. So the issue we've been having with On3 and the disparity between all four recruiting sites, so you could see one eventually fall off because if you have AI, which is going to get smarter and better with each recruiting profile and processing of a player, right? There isn't going to be any dispute. But again, they're always going to have the personal aspect to it, the personal touch that you need. So they're not necessarily going to go away, but it should hone in on the accuracy a little bit. We shouldn't have somebody who's a 5-star on one side and a 3-star on the other side because of the height difference, right? So look, it's going to be interesting to see. Again, it was just kind of off the rip there. They mentioned that, and I go, wow, that actually is really cool. Got me thinking of how I can utilize AI a little bit better for the show. But even game planning, right? How can you utilize game planning for preparing for the next game, right? I mean, AI is going to be able to digest that game that it just consumed and say, hey, this is how they cover it. Here's what they could do and give you a multitude of options to answer to that defense. I mean, now you're playing against not Nick Saban, but Nick Saban's brain, a computerized Nick Saban brain. Like, think about that. Am I getting too deep into this? I don't know. I'm just asking questions here, trying to figure out. But it's a little scary, right? Like, I'm not crazy to think like that. Like, that's something that's interesting to think about and possibly could be. Real quick, Super Chat from Daniel says, we will not be hunted at the University of Georgia. I can promise you that. $5 there from Daniel Riviere. Appreciate your super chat, big guy, as usual. But look, very interesting. Let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are on the AI and how it can impact recruiting as well as on the field play as well. Now, back to his takeaways. Another big takeaway for me is Harold Perkins is the next just true absolute dog killer. Okay, Harold Perkins was somebody that Florida was high on and felt like we had him in the bag up until we did not have him in the bag, and then we lost him, right? So that's kind of how that went with Harold Perkins. He was an absolute blast to watch last year. Whether you were a Florida fan, LSU fan, Bama fan, if you appreciate good football and you appreciate somebody who's just an absolute dog, Harold Perkins was somebody that was just a treat to watch. He was extremely fun to watch, and his stats were through the roof, and I can only expect him to be even better come his sophomore year. And he was talking about a few players on the line that are coming back from injury, a defensive tackle that, look, they were injured last year. This guy's coming back to DT who can take up some of those double teams that were being placed to Harold Perkins back in the linebacker. So it's only going to make Harold Perkins even better, which is just frightening to think about because this kid was only a freshman. And a lot of these guys, Bryant as well as Jimbo, both alluded to the fact that, look, they had a young team. They had some young players on the team that, look, another year in the process is going to allow them to get better. Harold Perkins was already better than 80% of the team, right? So it's going to be very scary to watch. I'm not looking forward to playing Harold Perkins. Wish he was on, wearing orange and blue, but it is what it is. It's going to haunt us for the next couple of years watching Harold Perkins play in an LSU uniform. And the last thing is focus. Okay, we already talked about focus on the UGA, but look, all in all, good talk from LSU and Brian Kelly. Really enjoyed hearing from them. And again, Brian Kelly and his accent was fun to hear him talk and just get to, this is he talked about being at Notre Dame. They really don't have too much of these, right? So he got to talk about that a little bit. And he also mentioned the transfer portal. He talked about it on the Page Show. He talked about it during his interview as well. And they had to go to the portal to replace a lot on the defensive side of the ball. And he goes, look, it's a red flag. I don't know what's back there. I don't know what to expect. And that got me thinking. That got the wheels turning a little bit because we talk about these guys, the Lane Kiffins, the Mike Norvells, the Deion Sanders, that are heavily pouring their efforts into the transfer portal and how the return is going to be. On paper, it looks great. It's like putting together the perfect fantasy football lineup, right? You're just looking at stats, and you show somebody, go, man, that team is stacked. Look at the lineup. Look at the numbers there, but it doesn't perform on the field. We all know that feeling, right? You've got the names that to suit the production, but they're just not giving it to you on the field. Could that happen with some of these teams that went heavy in on the transfer portal, like a Coach Prime, like a Mike Norvell, right? Look, although they are expected to do well, I don't know what I'm going to get come August. And that's what Brian Kelly was saying. He's like, look, we're excited. We've done all the right things, but there's a red flag there, as it is for everybody else with the transfer portal. So it was interesting to hear him say that because we've talked a lot of positivity about the portal and being able to go to pluck guys out. We've, haven't really hit the nail on the head of, well, again, the unknown is scary. And Florida has a lot of question marks there. A lot of the guys that we are hyped about as Florida fans are coming from the portal. Now, it paid off last year. Who came in the portal last year who we're still talking about? Montrell Johnson, Osiris Torrance. So, look, there is, you have your victory stories, but there is big question marks there. So